this, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our first speaker, Adam Blitz from the Ronin Institute and the Royal Anthropological Institute, who will speak to us about his project on the 4th century Constantinian frescoes from Trier. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If I can just, first of all, say a very big thank you to Leah and Leo and everyone at Torch, the Oxford Research Centre in the Humanities. The title, Before Ever the Flowers Were Named, derives from Evelyn Waugh's novel Helena, in which she embellishes the cult of the Empress and her quest for the true cross. Helena, being the wife of the Emperor of Constantius Chlorus, as well as the mother of Constantine I, Constantine the Great. Upon his father's death in 306 CE, Constantine was inaugurated and shortly afterwards married his second wife, Flavia Maxima Fausta, whom he put to death in 326 CE, along with his eldest son, Flavius Julius Crispus, who was alleged to have had an affair with his stepmother. And I should add that however compelling the narrative of the dramatis personae is, Romanticism is not my intention tonight. Rather, photogrammetry, the science of making images from photographs, is. So tonight, I will present a snapshot from a recent photogrammetric study of the 4th century Constantinian or Fausta ceiling frescoes from Trier. This study raises questions of intervention and conservation, as well as technical observations of fresco and inpainting application. It also develops theoretical notions of the gaze and reception theory by appeal to computer-aided technology to determine how participants engage with Roman portraiture. Lastly, it challenges current museological practice to display all-hung frescoes originally conceived for a ceiling with a cornice. The study builds upon an earlier project of mine, the Apamea project, in which two corpora of 4th century Apamean synagogue mosaics, located in musea in Damascus, respectively, were reunited first time since 1934. With recourse to photogrammetry and VR, the mosaics were consolidated and then reorientated to simulate the original planar projection in Unity 3D and Oculus Go technology. So from Syria to Trier, Treves, ancient Augusta Treverorum. Augusta Treverorum was refounded in honor of Augustus, circa 16 to 13 BE. Situated on the Moselle, the city sat at the intersection of two thoroughfares, Lyon to Köln and Reims, R-H-E-I-M-S, to Mainz. Under Claudius, the Trier became a colonia and seat of Roman administration in the 1st century CE. Destroyed by the Alemanni in 275, the city was reinvigorated by Diocletian in 293 as the capital of Belgica Prima and renamed Treveris. It became one of the imperial residences of Maximian in the house of Constantine. An elaborate building program ensued. The remains are evident today with the Aula, the Circus Maximus, the amphitheater, the Termae, and the Roman core of the city's cathedra, which you can see on the right-hand side. Scientific excavations began in 1943. Wartime bombardment became archaeology's handmaiden and enabled excavations of the Dom Liebfrauenkirche complex. Only then the material relationship between the city and Constantine firmly established. Further excavations revealed 50,000 fragments of ceiling frescoes from a residence beneath the imperial basilica, beneath the Romanesque cathedral that you see before you. And I've marked this in orange on the left-hand side. Assembled over 35 years, the frescoes depict 15 trompe-l'oeil coffered images of aurochs and togated men and women with crown and mira and pearls, palla and nimbus, or nimbi. These portraits have been interpreted as personifications, depictions of status designed to flaunt the wealth of family, Constantia, Fausta, and Helena. And I confess that in this presentation, I do refer to some of the images as Fausta, despite there being no scientific support. There's no epigraphic evidence, and even the dating of the destruction of the lavish room based on numismatic evidence, which may sit around the time of the death of Fausta and Crispus in 326 CE. That's also contested. The Fausta as fresco tradition derives from Theodor Kemp's enthusiasm, but it's become nonetheless part of the common parlance. Fieldwork consisted of 2 visits to the Diocesan Museum. The project was scoped in December of 2019, where I took several thousand photographs and initial measurements. And then a scientific study followed for the purpose of documentation 2 months later in February 2020. Equipment was limited to a camera, the Canon EOS 100, a compact DSLR, with a sensor size of 22.3 millimeters by 14.9 and pixels at 3.7 micrometers, or 0.0037 millimeters. This is a very light camera that could mast. The only other equipment was X-Rite's color checker, the industry standard, and a Stanley Smart Measure Pro tape measure. The ceiling frescoes are displayed in 2 different galleries with dissimilar lighting conditions and presentation. I mean, before you is the main gallery. These fresco fragments were sliced to a depth of 0.5 centimeters and then attached to an aluminium substrate, the stucco bedding layer being all but erased. And these ceiling frescoes, as you can see, are wall hung. At least in the cornice gallery, the frescoes are in the correct orientation. The main gallery is very much the showpiece of the museum. It consists of a room with 3 walls and 2 partitions, either side of the entrance. And the floor to ceiling height is 4.3 meters, and the frescoes are hung 1 meter off the ground. All the frescoes in this gallery are 2.5 meters in height, that being the aluminium substrate I just mentioned. And on the 2 long walls, the reconstructed frescoes run for approximately 8 meters stretch. The cornice gallery is altogether very different. It's split level, there's an atrium window, and the frescoes are set behind acrylic. And all of these factors greatly impede any photographic attempts. However, in this reverse of the fragments with the imprint of the stucco from a viewing gallery above. The cornice gallery simulates the construction of the Roman ceiling, its suspension from joists, the laying of the stucco on wooden chevrons. I mean, the principle is actually not too dissimilar from the weave you might find under a cushion with Pirelli rubber webbing, if you like, but this here is triangular and with wooden lathes. As for photogrammetry and the production of orthomosaic, a composite rendering to scale, we need 80% overlap of the photographs. So standing at a distance of 1.5 meters from the frescoes in the main gallery, there had to be 20 movements of 40 centimeters. That's 40 centimeter strides to the right, if you like, 20 movements. There also had to be 8 vertical movements of 30-centimeter drops to ensure coverage of this 8-meter long by 2.5-meter wide display. In total, the gallery required 320 photographs for the long walls on the left and the right-hand side, and 160 photos for the 4 individual portraits. So that's a total of 480 photographs for this one gallery. All of this needs to consider the pressure points of limited access, different and evolving lighting conditions, the battery life of the camera, as well as storage on the SD cards. And for those of you who are interested, this is my total calculation. One thing it doesn't have actually is time. And again, this bears upon storage and processing. I used Agisoft Metashape to generate the orthomosaics of several gigabytes each. And if you look at the image on the right-hand side, you can see the white dots, which represent the location of the camera. So you can see that I'm pretty much following in a horizontal fashion the green border of the frescoes, and then lower down at the lowest register, the blue of the frescoes. For my purpose, it produced a resolution of 0.039 millimeters, where I could clearly see the brush strokes and the intervention. And this image is the one of the woman with the mirror and the anachlysis gesture of her pulling back the veil and unveiling her face. You will see more of this image later. Post-processing was the frescoes from the Cornice Gallery included some reflection because of the acrylic. And if you look very carefully, sort of in the middle of the image, you can see my reflection there wearing a high visibility green vest. And this is despite using a polarizing filter. But Photoshop was also necessary for the purpose of masking. One of the main goals was to remove the intervention from previous generations of conservators, which, as you can see with the color, was quite extensive. I mean, I'd rather present this as an option, an interpretation, but not a defining feature. And the intervention was able to be removed with the use of a height map, the frescoes being 0.5 centimeters higher than the aluminium substrate with the in-painting. Ultimately, the goal is to create an image, a reconstructed ceiling with all 15 portraits, and then to set it approximately 7 meters off the ground, as the archaeological reports would suggest, and then put it in a VR application such as Unity 3D, or a VR head-mounted display such as Oculus, which you saw at the start of this presentation, albeit in reverse. This is a ceiling, not a pavement. There are additional questions which can be asked once the ceiling frescoes are resuspended and united with the cornice. And those questions pertain to viewing, both the active role from the perspective of the artist, the plan view, and perhaps thaumaturgic questions. I mean, but also, can we establish where Fausta, if that is indeed Fausta, the woman with the pearl necklace, is gazing? And how does the participant view these images on the ceiling as opposed to the wall? There's been much discussion as to perceptions of viewing, reminded of the work of John Clark, of Jas Elsner, and the body of scholarship that advances the pioneering studies on receptions esthétique and reception theory, the latter field of visual culture. For Apamea, I was particularly interested in Rebecca Mulholt's work, where she applies Walter Benjamin's 1917 essay on the dichotomy between painting and drawing, horizontality versus verticality, which Mulholt applies to Roman mosaics North Africa. I want to use technical purpose of virtual creation to assist conservators, but I also want the art technology to reorient objects and challenging practice to explore what happens when we view the frescoes on the wall currently displayed versus a simulation of the original setting. And that's where eye tracking is in. Eye tracking being the process of measuring eye movements to determine where a person is looking and what they're looking at and from. Tracking devices use infrared to calculate the location where a person is looking by information extracted from the individual's face and eye. The eye gaze coordinates are calculated with to the screen and by a pair of X coordinates. Movements are divided into fixations and saccades. Fixations occur when we give a given point, while occur with larger eye movement. Combining fixations and saccades, it's possible to create a heat map of regions that have attracted the most interest. And this is an expanding field of research, and there are now devices such as HTC Vive's ROVR, which captures the gaze from a headset, not that I have one. Here's a preview of what current wall-hung frescoes like as part of a desktop experiment. What happens when a participant gazes at the image of Fausta for 9 seconds? I'd like to walk you through this, if I may. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner, you can see the path, which is tracing the path eyes. You can see that it's focused very much on Fausta's face, but then my eyes are tracing order of the around the portrait. This image on the side, this is a sail map. This is a topographical presentation which simplifies the data in prominent regions. More pertinent to this study is the image on the side, which was generated by the software I use, which shows a scatter chart of fixations. And beneath the Levenstein grid is effectively a distance calculator. If we take the monitor size in pixels, 136 being the horizontal, being the X, and that at 708 pixels being the height, and say we divide it into a 5-by region, a grid, E to E or A to U, we can then situate coordinates of this fixation in those demarcations. We can go further. We can sum length, that's the duration of these fixations, and build a heat map with color reference to illustrate what the participant is looking at and how long. And on the side, you'll see a verified heat map just built manually in Excel. But you can see, for 21,384 milliseconds, my eyes are very much focusing on the region that corresponds to H, which is Fausta's eyes and her crown. It's the upper part of her face and her head. But then if we are to look at R and S, we can see for a lesser period of time, my eyes are also looking at her left hand, which is holding her chest, where she's removing this strip of pearls, this gesture. So my eyes are very much focusing on her eyes, and then the movement that she's trying to, the movement that she's executing, and she's trying to entice our view with it. I do believe it is now time to say regards from Treveri, and thank you.